The NFL the owners have voted unanimously to approve a new national anthem rule that says if you're not going to stand, stay in the locker room. If you go to the field, you have to stand. If you have a protest, your team's going to get fined. This is the first time you're hearing this. What's your reaction, Mr. President?
Well, I think that's good. I don't think people should be staying in locker rooms, but still, I think it's good. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country. You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. And the NFL owners did the right thing if that's what they've done.
Big news in the NFL as the league has passed a rule change that mandates players and personnel on the field standing for the national anthem, a rule that has been received with some backlash. To discuss this, we now bring in the MMQB's Jonathan Jones. Jonathan, first of all, what is your initial reaction to the league's new anthem policy?
Yeah, man, I think it's a really bad policy. Ultimately, I don't think that they should have had a policy to begin with. I think that this policy with its certain bullet points is going to bring up so many various issues along the way whenever we reach whenever something else happens in this country. There are going to be holes all in this policy. Look, when you say respect the flag, okay, well, what does that mean? And I tried to ask Roger Goodell that. Who is the arbiter of this respect? What would be considered disrespect? There really is no answer for that. Stephen Jones told our Albert Breer that we'll know it when we see it. Well, disrespect for the flag and to the anthem, to me, may be different than someone else. And so I don't understand how they're going to arbitrate this. I don't understand what disrespect is. Is it raising a fist? Is it, as we see Odell doing there, is it having your head down during the national anthem? Do you have to stand at attention? All of these things are not answered. This policy, if you come up with a policy, and these owners have had a very long time to come up with it. They talked for a very long time on Tuesday. They talked Wednesday morning. And to come up with a policy that has such such a broad and vague statement that leaves itself so open to interpretation. One, I don't think that there should be a policy. And then two, if this is the policy that you come up with, it's a very bad policy.
Jonathan, how much do you think this policy and the owner's decision was a direct reaction to Trump?
Yeah, I think it was a clear reaction to Trump. I think that they are very afraid of the power of his thumbs when it comes to Twitter. I think that very clearly with the midterm elections coming up, that they did not want to be a policy talking point in 2018. The funny thing, of course, this was clearly a policy that was an attempt to satisfy all parties at least a little bit, right? It's full of half measures. Well, as we heard earlier and saw, Trump goes on Fox and Friends, and he says that he's not totally happy with it. And so, of course, he's not. Of course, his policy failed when you're trying to satisfy and mollify Trump. And then, of course, he comes out and says that he doesn't think that they should be standing in the locker room at whatsoever.
What boggles my mind about it is I don't know, with respect to the issue at hand, very important, but I don't know if this would still be a story without what he said last year and the NFL owners continuing to bring it up. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely took this and bastardized it and turned it into his own thing, right? This was originally, of course, about police brutality against black and brown people. It was about criminal injustice and the inequality in the criminal justice system. And so that he made this about him, that players then knelt because of what he said about them, that Bob McNair said what he had to say, that Mike Pence, does that thing where he walks out of the Colts game when he had planned to all along, of course. All of this ended up going very far away from the original point from Colin Kaepernick. And so you're right, Robin. At the end of at week 17, how many guys were actually kneeling? How many guys were participating in some form of protest? And again, that is not to belittle what they at all are doing, but that is to say that if you have a policy in place, now you are poking me in the chest. Now you're telling me what I can and cannot do as a grown, rich man. Well, I'm going to have a problem with that.
Now, the NFLPA tweeted a response saying they intend to challenge any aspect of this that is not consistent with the CBA. Why weren't the players consulted here?
Well, they weren't consulted because the owners believe that this is their decision to make, that they heard the voices of the players throughout the season and the offseason, and that they are tasked with figuring out what the solution should be. Of course, That's the issue, and that's what I wrote about, is that when you get a group of 32 mostly white men in a room deciding what's best for a group of mostly black players as it concerns their concerns over the African American community, well, right there you see the issue. As I wrote, there are so many things that we see in everyday life, from commercials to company taglines to various other things, where you're like, you know what, a black person was not consulted on that, because there's no way this would have gone through had they just asked like one black person. Well, here you go with this anthem policy. And I'm not here to say that one black person in the room, you plop me down the room, I'm going to save the other 31 owners from making a terrible decision. But this is clearly a case of them not having one other black person in the room.
You know, Jonathan, another aspect of it that I always find a little intriguing is they talk about the reaction from fans, right? And this is what fans want. But are they ignoring an entire portion of the fan base who's going to have some backlash to this decision?
I do believe that there is a plurality of fans who disagree with the kneeling. I do believe that there is probably the largest group is that, and so I don't know if that's 30%, and then you have, you know, a 25% that's something else, and 20% so on and so forth. But I certainly believe that they are ignoring the majority of fans who are either ambivalent or for the player protests. And so what they are instead doing is they are looking at today's NFL fan. They are not looking at all at tomorrow's NFL fan. And as we see the culture in America changing demographically, they are sticking with what is ultimately the white conservative, and mostly, of course, within that, the white male conservative. Well, that may very well be your fan of today. That does not mean that that is the fan of tomorrow. And so this, to me, is not only a retroactive policy, but it is a short-sighted policy, one that does not even at all attempt to capitalize on what tomorrow's fan may be, that we see from other professional sports that are really rising up the ranks. And of course, I'm talking about the NBA.
Jonathan, thank you so much for the insight. And for more on this story, we bring in SI's legal analyst, Michael McCann, to talk about the potential legal implications this rule could have. Michael, are there any legal implications for the NFL here, given the players were not even consulted?
Yeah, Madeline, it makes a difference because in the law, when there's a union management relationship, when the management does things without the consent of the union, it creates the opportunity for other areas of law to enter the story. So, for instance, here, it makes it more possible that players could bring an antitrust lawsuit, arguing that teams have conspired in an anti-competitive way to deny good players a chance to play because of the fact that they would be punished if they protest on the field. Also, there are potential labor law claims in terms of unfair labor practices. Also, maybe discriminatory claims with the EEOC. I mean, it just creates the door. It creates the opportunity for issues that wouldn't exist if the league and union had worked together on this.
Michael, to your point, does this help Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reid's collusion cases, given it is clear the NFL doesn't want players who protested?
Yeah, Robin, I would be very surprised if we don't see the lawyers for Kaepernick and Reid argue, look, this is what we've been saying all along. All this does is codify what we have said has been an informal policy in the league, that owners are willing to deny players a chance to play because they partake in some form of protest during the anthem. Now, it doesn't get them to the finish line because the lawyers still have to show that owners talked, that there was an actual conspiracy, that teams agreed not to allow these players. But look, it looks like owners were talking about these issues, right? I mean, the fact is they talked about them this week. They talked about them after what we understand to be 15 owners had been deposed by lawyers for Kaepernick. It certainly looks like there's some degree of coordination among owners, and that gets at the heart of the collusion argument.
Now, the protests started to bring attention to racial injustices in the U.S. Bucs rookie Sterling Brown is suing the Milwaukee police as a video has surfaced showing Brown being tased by several police officers in a Walgreens parking lot. Now, we've seen cases like this that have not gone in favor of the victim. Is there something you're seeing in this situation that might lead to a different outcome for Brown?
Sure, Madeline. So you're right. These cases often don't prove successful in spite of the fact that we see videos that are very alarming. Here, perhaps one difference is that I suspect Brown isn't seeking to go to trial. He might argue that he is. I think what he'll use this as an opportunity to advocate for change, that he'll hope to get some kind of settlement with the city of Milwaukee where concrete commitments are made to reforms that would prevent other persons from being in the situation that he found himself. So I have a feeling, at least certainly based on his early comments, that he'll use this as a vehicle for advocacy, that even if it doesn't ultimately prove in showing that the city and the police department broke the law per se, the video itself really speaks for itself, and that can lead to reform.
Almost eerie to see the Sterling Brown video on the same day the NFL announced its new anthem rule. Michael McCann, appreciate your time as always.
Thank you.
So my question is, physically, how did you feel out there today?
I had my moments, but I think everybody at this point is tired, or worn down, or whatever the case may be. But still trying to make plays to help our team win, put us in position to win. And we had moments, we had an opportunity, but we didn't make enough plays.
LeBron James has been carrying the Cavs this postseason, but how much is that weighing on him? To talk these conference finals, we now welcome in our NBA analyst, John Starks, in our shot clock segment. You know the rules, 24 seconds on the clock. Let's start with this one. Fatigue was a factor for LeBron. Let's put 24 seconds on the clock for you, John.
I disagree.
You disagree?
Yeah, I disagree. In this moment right here, and especially during this time of the season, you can't think about that. It's man over matter. And so you just have to go out there and play. He don't want to give into it, because once you start giving into it, you can't go out there and perform the way he's capable of performing. So I disagree with that. I know everybody want to, give him that excuse, but he shouldn't give that excuse to himself.
I mean, the guy's one of the greatest players in the game. You're saying he's got to step up. Robin, 24 seconds on the clock. Your answer?
I wouldn't say it's an excuse, but of course it's a factor. He played every game for this team. He's played so many postseasons. He's carrying this team more than anyone else has to carry their team. And you look at the line from last night, 26, 10, and 5, and it was a bad game for LeBron. It shows you the standard for him is basically flawless. And the rest of the teammates, the rest of the starters combined for under 25 points. So sometimes it's going to wear on him, of course.
I think I'm going to have to go with Robin on this one. I think they're both really solid points, but Robin, I kind of agree. You know what? It's got to catch up. It's got to wear on him. Those veteran tired legs and the load that he's carrying kind of showed a little bit. All right, let's move on. Game 6.
I'm tired and I'm here.
I know, right? We gotta fight through, though. Everyone has those moments. Game 6 will be LeBron's final game in Cleveland. Robin, we'll start with you. 24 seconds on the clock. Go.
I know I should be definitive, but I'm going to hedge a little bit. If the Cavs lose, Game 6 will be LeBron's final game in Cleveland, because I do not think he'll be playing there next year outside of anything but a championship. I mean, we just talked about the fatigue factor. He needs, especially as he gets older, to shift off the ball a little bit. He needs other guys who can contribute, so he doesn't have to go superhuman for them to win series.
All right, look at right up to the wire. I think that's a solid point, though. John, your answer, 24 seconds on the clock. Let's go.
I disagree. I think that he has another year left in him. I don't think he want to leave, Cleveland, not taking them to another championship. I think if they get to the championship, obviously he's going to stay. But I believe that, he will be back. I think they're going to get some more pieces to bring in and give him that confident that he's going to go out there and have an opportunity to win next year. Not this year.
Yeah, not this year. This year might be a wash, I think, John thinks. But I kind of agree with you on this one. I think he could stay, especially because he saw how challenging that was the last time he left. If he did it again, it'd be a tough one. All right, let's move on to the Celtics. Jayson Tatum would go #1 overall in a redraft. John, 24 seconds on the clock. Go.
I agree with that 100%. This kid has been performing well beyond his age. He's 20 years old, doing what he's doing in the playoffs with the confidence, understanding that they need him to step up, and he done stepped up big all year long since Gordon Hayward been out. And so he's coming through, along with Brown and the rest of the young fellas, but he's definitely would be my #1 pick if we had a chance to redraft.
That'd be incredible. All right, Robin, 24 seconds on the clock for your response. Let's go.
It sure feels like it right now. I mean, seeing this guy score in the highest leverage moments already in his rookie season. But to play devil's advocate for a second, no one was saying this until recently. Ben Simmons has all that potential. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell was in the mix. And with Tatum, if you're going to pick him apart a little bit, he's playing within this system that we give Brad Stevens all this credit for. We've seen guys not thrive to the same level when they've left Boston, so perhaps that's part of it.
Well, and to be fair, Ben Simmons wasn't in this draft, even though he is a rookie, so he wouldn't be in the redraft mix.
That is true.
But Donovan Mitchell, I do see your point there. I think, however, everyone's saying
it would be Tatum over Donovan Mitchell. I was just wrong. I was thinking Rookie of the Year race. I'm just wrong.
I appreciate it, though. All right, now moving on to the Western Conference. Rockets win Game 5 at home. Robin, let's start with you. 24 seconds, go.
I will say no. I've been picking the Warriors, saying they're unbeatable. I'm not going to change that now because I would love to be wrong about this like I just was. So I would love that to happen. I need Houston to prove it to me, though. And they've done already a lot to win me over. Even if they had lost the other night, it wouldn't have been any problem with them. It would have been the fact that they're playing the Warriors. Their response was incredible in that game. I hope they can keep it going. But until otherwise, I got to pick Golden State.
All right up to the buzzer. Robin's picking Golden State. John, 24 seconds on the clock. What do you got?
I disagree. I think if the factors that Klay Thompson may not play and Iguodala may not play, then those two guys right there from a defensive standpoint, not just so much scoring standpoint, but from a defensive standpoint, if they don't have them two guys on the court, they're not going to be able to stop James Harden. And obviously, Chris Paul is just playing incredible basketball right now. So they without one of their flamethrowers and Klay Thompson. So I like Houston in game number 5.
John, I got to agree with you again. I mean, Chris Paul is playing probably the best playoff basketball we've seen from him. They're going home. They just stole one on the road in Oakland. They're going home. I think Houston could win this one.
Please let me be wrong. We're now joined by John Wertheim and Jake Fisher, who have a new story going deep inside the FBI's college basketball corruption investigation. The blockbuster revelation involves the FBI agent at the center of this. And did you find it shocking? What was your response when you saw that the guy who was really the central piece of this was perhaps corrupt himself using federal funds improperly?
Yeah, that's the accusation against, as you say, the lead agent, that in the course of this investigation, there were funds set aside to pay players and coaches, and the allegation is that the FBI agent misappropriated these funds. That, to me, was an absolutely stunning revelation.
Now, in this piece also, you kind of mentioned that the FBI agents were planted here, as is often the case, but they weren't just kind of there. They kind of gave Christian Dawkins a nudge a little bit. Does that change how people or how you feel about this case?
I think it's interesting because we were watching the FBI's original press conference yesterday, and they are claiming to have found this bombshell that is going to kind of expose this dark underbelly without college basketball. And we come to find out that this is a probe that started almost 3 years ago with a cooperating witness that ultimately led them to Christian Dawkins and these college basketball coaches who allegedly participated. But in the meantime, the money kind of started in point A and got to point B rather than the reverse.
Yeah, I mean, my two big reactions, obviously, the revelation was one, but it's also, all right, this isn't something you stumbled upon. This isn't something you were like, here are crimes being committed. It was basically go commit some crimes, encouraging him to bribe coaches. So I almost felt bad for Christian Dawkins here. I assume there was corruption going on in NCAA basketball, but if the FBI agent involved himself was corrupt, and they're pushing him along, it kind of blows the whole story up to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big sort of 35,000-foot view of this, which is, there's a lot that goes on. A lot of these wiretaps you probably would not condone, but this is a multi-year, multi-agency, multi-state investigation, and at the end of the day, there's some corruption in college basketball, and the families of highly touted recruits get some cash, and there's some assistant coaches that might be on the take. Again, no one is condoning this, but I don't think that's necessarily the bombshell that the government had in mind.
And there's lots of levels to this case. Obviously, Rick Pitino was fired after allegations with Louisville. NCAA stars were implicated. A few of them were suspended for the tournament. Andy Miller, Dawkins' former employee, renounced his NBA agenting certification, but he has not yet been charged. Is this just the beginning of this saga?
I think so, especially because when you talk to people involved with it and around the case, everyone kind of alludes to a few more charges potentially bubbling up to the surface, but also, as the documents first leaked in the fall on other outlets on the websites, people were claiming this was going to affect dozens and dozens of programs. And we've only really seen 6 or 7 be implicated at this point. And now that we're starting to see that these flaws in their FBI's investigation come to light, I'd imagine they try to pivot a little bit and try to ultimately unearth some other things that they found.
Yeah, you have to think there's more to come. Adidas has been the shoe brand that's been implicated here. That is not the only shoe brand in youth basketball. There have been a number of college programs, as Jake says, but certainly not everyone. But again, I think you sort of take a step back, and especially with this knowledge that we've come across, that the lead investigator is alleged to have been corrupted. I don't know. I mean, we'll see where this goes, but I'm not sure this is what the government had in mind when they greenlit this and devoted all these funds and resources a few years ago.
I mean, does it go back to a central point a lot of people have? It's almost like a corruption streak, right? You're looking for the corruption in college basketball. You find this FBI agent is corrupt, and then people are still going to go, but what about the NCAA making all this money off of kids who aren't paid? And I feel like that's still going to wind up being everybody's takeaway.
The other irony here is that what did they get arrested for? Not for NCAA violations, but for fraud charges. Well, you need someone to be defrauded in order to prove fraud. Who has been defrauded here? And the government's allegation is the schools. So the NCAA institutions, which you could make a case are central players here, are the defrauded parties, which is an interesting legal theory.
And it's an especially bizarre charge, being that a lot of the athletic programs that these schools obviously own and oversee are complicit in these charges. So how can the University of Louisville, for example, be a victim by the Louisville basketball program? It's really a confounding theory.
A little bit of a cyclical situation we're in here, right? I mean, is there really a way to fix this? It's a question everyone's been asking. As deep as you guys have dove into this, is there a solution you see?
Well, I mean, the economic model is at the heart of this. The fact that you have this distorted economic model. This is a black market here, right? And we see this, I don't know what people are rational actors, and when money is being made and there's unpaid labor, it stands to reason the labor will seek to be paid. I think you just need to change the economic model, because what's being asked of these student athletes now, basically everyone's making money, the coffers are sloshing through with capital and you're getting nothing. It's sort of, you're begging for corruption.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would rather have the resources go into fixing it rather than investigating it.
Especially because the crux of this financial component is that you have these apparel companies like Adidas looking to invest a blanket sum over an entire athletic program, ultimately to influence those athletes to later sign with them as an endorser moving on, which this is kind of exposed. You can skip all that middleman process and eliminate all these dirty hands that can pick a piece of that pie in that process by simply just going straight to the athletes.
Jake Fisher, John Wertheim, check out their piece. They go as far inside as you can on the FBI investigation into corruption in college basketball.
All right, we'll be back.